Good morning. I want to start this with an oldie but a goodie.
Attention all personnel. We're patched into Armed Forces Radio for a special broadcast. It sounds big, folks. This is Robert Pierpoint in Seoul. I've just returned from outside the newly built conference hall in Panmunjom. The hall is a symbol of the renewed hope for peace. It is almost finished and you can still smell the greenness of the wood. 2 years of constant disappointment have made skeptics of us all. However, the word from Panmunjom today is that an armistice agreement may be reached at almost any hour. While one of the bloodiest battles of the war rages on, it seems peace is finally within our grasp. Still have to be decided. Final preparations for an armistice, translating the truce document, which is not yet completed, and agreement on a final truce line. But after a week of secret sessions in Panmunjom, the Red delegates have finally announced they will discuss preparations for signing the armistice agreement. There is certainly some distance to go in these negotiations, but for the first time in over three.
Yeah, that was from MASH, a comedy, a sitcom a while back. You kids might not remember it. It was a comical look at the 3-year war in Korea that took 10 seasons. I think there were 10 episodes of Christmas. But that's Korea is just a look back in how history repeats itself. We fought a bloody war, police action in Korea for 3 years, many casualties on both sides. And at the end of the day, when, quote, peace, end quote, was declared, the border separating South and North Korea was pretty much where it was when all it started. So the years that followed, there were a lot of finger pointing and blaming, but it repeated itself in Vietnam. Vietnam, we had years in the Indochina War. We took over for the French. It became Vietnam, and it became a battle between North and South Vietnam, bleeding over into Cambodia and some other localities. And after years, and actually, our footprint in Vietnam, Indochina, started under Eisenhower, and each president, including Eisenhower, all the way up to Nixon, at some point campaigned on getting out of Vietnam. And in all cases, that president, left, right, Republican, Democrat, after campaigning on getting out of Vietnam, increased our presence until Nixon, who was embattled back home politically, he pulled completely out of Vietnam, very disorderly, and there was a lot of blame gaming there. And at the end of the day, we had less in Vietnam with the struggle against communism than we started with. Hindsight, Vietnam actually evolved into a fairly decent trading partner with America. But anyway, again, history repeats itself in Afghanistan. No nation has been able to invade and hold Afghanistan for any significant. The Brits tried it. The Brits are no longer there. The Soviets tried it. The Soviets are no longer there. And the United States tried it with a lot of support from NATO allies. And slowly, after 2 decades and many casualties, America and its allies got tired of the fight in Afghanistan. The perpetrators of 9/11, long since gone or imprisoned. Osama bin Laden was shot and buried at sea. And a lot of his ringleaders also went down years before we pulled out. Now, as we see the second term of Trump coming, we see history already being rewritten. So I thought maybe I'll just put it out there before history is completely rewritten. And I see on the interwebs, they are still blaming President Joe Biden. Let me remind you, and let YouTube not take this down. Here's how it went down. America reacted to 9/11, where a lot of the Al Qaeda being trained by Osama bin Laden were being protected and trained in Afghanistan under the rulers at the time. They were called the Taliban. Well, we took we took out Al Qaeda, we took out the Taliban, we got distracted with Iraq, and we divided our war efforts. We made fun of the French for not getting involved in Iraq, although at that time the French footprint was larger than the American footprint. But that's a completely different story. I don't want to digress too much. And along comes Trump campaigning on getting us out of the wars. Okay, what did Trump do? First, he bartered for the release of the Taliban ringleaders who were in prison. I forget the number, something like 500, a significant part of the leadership. And he bartered with the multiple forces in Afghanistan on America pulling out. By the time Joseph Biden was duly elected and duly took office, despite a little anti-constitutional effort on January 6th, Mr. Biden took office in a world where Trump had already made deals with the Taliban to own Afghanistan and for us to get the fuck out. And yes, after 2 decades, America wanted out. Admit it. Whether you're left or right, you were tired of Afghanistan. The bad guys, as we perceived them at the time, were either dead or in prison. Not a lot of people knew that Trump had bartered for the release of Taliban leadership. But by the time Mr. Biden took office, there were 2 places in Afghanistan where U.S. forces still had a footprint. The most strategic was Bagram Air Base. And the secondary, where the headquarters was, where the operations were being called for, had shrunk down to a smaller area far away from Bagram. Bagram itself was surrounded completely on day 1 of Biden by Taliban and pro-Taliban forces. There was no land route in or out of Bagram. Yep, it was an air base. You could do an airlift like the Berlin, the very expensive Berlin airlift that cost a lot of money. Keep in mind, America is politically and emotionally sick and tired of fighting in Afghanistan. Well, in Bagram Air Base was a lot of equipment turned over by previous administrations to the Afghan government. What is the Afghan government? Well, what we were trying to set up with the Taliban all in prison and in shambles was a duly elected Afghani government. Sadly, they didn't have the will to continue the fight. So Biden comes into office with an agreement to get out of Afghanistan, and including Bagram Air Base, which is completely surrounded by Taliban. There's only 2 ways to keep that equipment, to do it an orderly withdrawal. A, return forces to Afghanistan and continue the war so you could do a retrograde, or B, pull out. Biden chose B, to continue Trump's plan to pull out. It got messy, it got sloppy, it got ugly, and I'm even very upset at Mr. Biden for how it went down, as per giving people in Afghanistan who helped the United States and our allies, getting them out. That was a big fuck up. But when you're kind of put in the corner and you're faced with either A, continue the pullout, which is already sloppy as fuck, or B, return forces and increase military actions so you can do a more orderly pullout. Remember, America is sick of being in Afghanistan. America is sick of filling up grave sites at Arlington National and other national cemeteries. We're tired of bringing our boys home in caskets. We're sick of it. So there was really no viable option but to get out. Biden did try to delay Trump's original pullout date. Now that I'm thinking about it, Trump's dad should have pulled out much faster from his mom, but that's a different story altogether. Yeah, so we pulled out. Those of you rewriting history and saying it's all Biden's fault, think back. Did you really want us to stay in Afghanistan? Did you really want to send a lot more body bags home? I didn't. Most veterans I know who served in Afghanistan, they didn't want it. I've been at odds with some other veterans on the YouTube, on the X, on over over many things. But in my experience, everyone agrees it was past time to get the fuck out of Afghanistan. I'm actually going to blame some of this on President Obama, one of my heroes. Quite frankly, in my opinion, once we took out Osama bin Laden, case closed, get the fuck out. Okay. He didn't do that. I don't know what terrorist threats he saw or what strategic benefits he saw, but we didn't get out of Afghanistan then, and we didn't really have an end date. By the way, Mr. Trump and Mr. Trump's followers, one thing you don't do is tell the enemy when you're leaving. You don't tell them that if you say we're leaving by this date, they are prepared for it. What Biden did was delay that date a little bit and kind of threw them off. It would have been worse if we held to Trump's schedule. We did have to get out. Everybody agrees we had to get out. Was it get out under Trump's plan? Was it get out under Biden's forced plan? Or was it return forces to Afghanistan and fight our way out, do a tactical retrograde? Come on, my fellow veterans, you know. Many of you on YouTube actually served in Afghanistan. You know this. Speak out and remind the public how it really went down. Don't just let people sit around and blame Biden. It was time to get out. We got out. The setup for getting out, the plan was agreed by Trump, and America has to get better at making their agreements. Not failing at their agreements like our allies in south of Turkey and Syria. Those guys have been fighting the bad guys by our side for many years, and one day Trump up and just abandoned them. When we keep breaking our promises, even if the presidency changes, if we keep breaking promises made, we're going to have a shit. It's too late. We have your reputation. We just reelected a criminal, a misogynist, a xenophobe, and we did it the right way this time. We have to live with that. Don't sit around and change history. And that is all I got to say about that. Cheerio, motherfuckers. Cheery the fuck-o.